One of the real gifts of the intuitive part of our personality is its ability to help us search for and find meaning and purpose in our lives. Welcome to Unlocking the Power of Your Personality Type. I'm your host, Samantha Mackay, lead trainer at Truity, certified coach and trainer, and longtime believer in the power of using personality type for personal growth. Now, I want you to remember that your 4-letter Myers-Briggs type is not a box. It's not something you're stuck inside, just limited to expressing those 4 preferences. Instead, I want you to think of it like a platform for understanding your natural strengths, your natural weaknesses, as well as being a guide as to where you can grow. And in this series, we're looking at your Myers-Briggs type as a series of processes instead of preferences. And this allows us to look at the 8 elements of personality as individual tools that you can use to help you navigate the obstacles that arise on the way to you achieving your goals and aspirations. And today we're talking about intuition. How can you build strength? How can you practice using intuition, whether you're a sensor or an intuitive? Because there's times when we both need to practice using that as a skill. And so in this episode, we're going to be discussing how it can help you feel more creative, why you avoid it, and then 5 strategies for practicing and strengthening your relationship with your intuition. So let's talk about how intuition helps you. When we're using our intuition, we're reading between the lines. We're looking for something that isn't obvious. We're interpreting a situation. We're speculating on something that we can't be certain is true or not. Practicing our intuition allows us to search for and find meaning within our lives, to appreciate the larger systems and natural orders that we live within, to experience the joy of being creative and feeling resourceful and solving problems from unexpected places. And it also allows us to use our imagination to see a different way we could live, see possibilities and potential in all the things around us, for ourselves, for others, and for the planet. And so the question I have for you here is, how would tapping into your imagination help you right now? Would it be to solve a problem? Would it be to be creative, to imagine a new future for yourself? Would it help you feel joy and excitement, to imagine different places you could travel to or different ways you could solve a problem? Would it help you find purpose and meaning in your life? So why do we avoid using the intuitive part of our personality? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is we're all used to shooting down everyone else's dreams. The moment you suggest an aspiration or a project or an idea or a future possibility, what most people say, and what even you have said when other people do this to you, is, here's why that's not going to work. That's not realistic. That's not possible. Let me tell you all the ways that isn't going to work. And while we think we're doing someone else a favor by trying to make sure they don't waste their time on something that isn't going to work out, we are in fact really shutting down the dream, imaginative, intuitive part of someone's personality. And that can be really depressing. And so after a time, we just stop trying, or we stop sharing, or we stop practicing using that part of ourselves. Now, another reason is we don't often trust our intuition. It can feel a bit too uncertain. It doesn't come with evidence. We can't prove it to someone else. It can feel a little bit out there when we're trusting messages that seem to come through our body, or sparks of insight that just pop into our mind. And the less we trust our intuition, the less we rely on it. And yet we can get some very powerful information and messages that come through these hunches and insights, sensations, and even through our dreams. And so the more you start to practice trusting your intuition, the more comfortable and skilled you become at using it. And finally, one of the other reasons we avoid using or even sharing our intuition is it can be really hard to explain how we came up with that idea in the first place. Something might sound so crazy to someone else who hasn't been on the same journey you are, and if you can't explain all the steps that took you to get there, someone else is going to struggle to join you in that place with that insight and that idea. And so for all these reasons and more, we start to avoid using and sharing and practicing our intuition. So the question I have for you here is, who Or what shoots down your ideas, dreams, or aspirations? Is it you? Is it a story you carry around? Is it someone close to you? Is it the organization you work in? And whatever that story is, how does it stop you from really embracing and using your intuition? So let's talk strategies. What are the different ways that you can practice honing your intuition? And remember, this isn't a new skill for you. You do use the intuitive part of your personality every day. Use it when you share a story, when you read a book, when you watch TV, when you imagine how you could redecorate your home, when you redesign the garden, you imagine different places you could travel to, when you imagine yourself getting a promotion or becoming a parent. The key here is, how could you become more skilled or more nuanced around using that part of your personality, using that part of yourself? So I have 5 strategies for practicing your intuition. Go deeper, indulge, mix it up, speculate, and imagine. So let's see how we can go deeper. So I want you to practice listening for the things that are not being said, for moving past the words and reading between the lines, interpreting what's going on. So when you talk to someone, when you read an article or listen to a podcast, listen for the associations, the interpretations, the metaphors. Notice the hunches or associations that come up for you. And look for hidden meanings. Watch out for symbols. And think about the connections that you've made, as well as the connections someone else might make. How might someone else interpret this differently to how you're interpreting it? And one useful way is to keep a diary of all these different hunches and insights and thoughts that come up in the conversations and what you're listening to and reading, and review it regularly to see what came true, what played out in the way you expected and what didn't play out in the way you expected, and use that to review and hone your intuition. You can also cross-check those associations and notes you've made with someone else to see what they thought and how they interpret it and whether they agree with you or not. And another way to really practice going deeper and listening for what isn't being said is when you walk into a room, close your eyes and really try and feel the ambience or atmosphere of the room. And even if nothing seems obvious, just take a guess. While your eyes are closed, just guess, what is the feel of this room? What is the energy of this room? What can I sense that I have no evidence for? So now let's talk about indulging. And indulging is the opposite of dream killing. This is where we allow and give space for and indulge other people's dreams and our own. We don't shoot ideas down. We're indulging other people and giving them space to share those dreams, aspirations, and ideas. And so what often happens when we hear someone share a dream with us or an idea is we go, but this won't work. But have you thought about this? But what about this? We use that but a lot. And so when we want to play the indulge game and give space for an indulgence of dreams, we play the yes and game instead. And so as opposed to trying to make something smaller, we build on it and make it bigger. So we can see new perspectives and insights by growing something rather than trying to cut it down. And so this is where you pretend there are no obstacles, and you pretend you have unlimited funds, and you pretend that anything is possible. Because when we're sharing an idea and we're indulging in our dreams, it's not the time or the place to look for all the reasons why it won't work. It's that phase of a project where we get to go bigger and dream bigger and just see all the possibilities before we bring reality into the equation. Now let's talk about mixing it up. We're going to bring change and variety and spice into our lives. There are many ways you can do this. One is to take a look at your routines and figure out a way to shift them all around and try something new. So maybe that's brushing your teeth with the opposite hand. Maybe that's taking a different route to work. Maybe that's having breakfast or lunch at a completely different place. We really want to challenge ourselves to do things we normally wouldn't. So you could read a book or watch a movie that's outside of your normal genre. You could travel to somewhere you haven't been before. You could go to a different cafe or restaurant. There are lots of different ways to slightly push ourselves out of our comfort zone and try something new. And they don't have to be big changes. Sometimes just sitting at a different chair at a meeting can just give you a whole new perspective, because we are such creatures of habit. We will often return to the same seat in the same room again and again and again, and simply making a small change of picking another seat can somehow shift our whole perspective on something. There's one other way you could practice mixing it up without actually doing anything tangible. And this is more of a mind game, where we make a list of all the changes that could happen in your life. Possibilities, possible changes. You could rearrange the furniture. You could get that promotion. Your car could break down. You could meet a friend for dinner. You could travel overseas. And so make a list of all those changes that could happen to you, and then think, what are the changes that would flow on from that change? So if your car broke down, what are the different changes that would happen after that? And don't just look at the bad ones. Look for the good ones too, because for every change that happens, there is always both positive and negative things that flow on after that. And I would encourage you to look for the benefits and imagine the benefits of each of those changes as a way to help you embrace change that happens every day anyway. Life is always changing. It is built into the seasons of our lives and our years. And so change is inevitable. The key is finding it easy to navigate when it arrives. So the way I want you to practice speculating is to have a lot of fun with words. So first off, try summarizing things. So take a movie or a book or an article or a podcast and try and identify the single key theme or the overarching theme of what you've read or interacted with, and summarize it into a sentence. Really, what is the overall meaning that you've found in this one particular thing? And then when you're explaining things, aim to use more speculative or figurative language. For example, instead of saying, I am tired, you could say, I am beat, because beat has different meanings and interpretations to it. Another way to have fun with this is to play word association games, or maybe even Mad Libs. But for example, if I say a word, what's the word you'd say in return? And then we just keep bouncing that back. So if I say pineapple, you say whatever the first thing that came into your mind was. Now, another way to practice speculation is people watching. So go out into the street or sit in a cafe or even just look at art and tell a story about that person's life without asking them any questions. What would you imagine is going on for them right now? What are they doing? What are their motivations? What are their hopes and fears and dreams? And practice telling stories about people you haven't met, purely based on what you can see about them. Another way you can do this is when you're driving. Look at the way other people are driving and speculate on whether they're cautious drivers or aggressive drivers, or what are the qualities or characteristics of the person based on their driving style. And lastly, imagine. This is where we're going to use our imagination to imagine a new future for ourselves and come up with different ways to solve complex problems. So when it comes to ourselves, I want you to think about where will you be in the next 5 years or 10 years. And you could even create a vision board using photos if you like, or maybe you just want to create a mind map. But first think, if I continue on my current trajectory without making any changes, where will I be in 5 years? And then if I make a few small changes and identify what those changes are, where will I be in 5 years instead? And then if I make some major changes, what will my 5 years look like in that scenario? And you can think about this from the perspective of what kind of work you'll be doing, where you'll be living, where your family will be, what kind of travel or adventures you've been on, and maybe even where your finances are at, or what you've studied and your education, and maybe even down to the kind of details of what kind of books are you reading, or what are you doing for fun. And we can also use our imagination to solve complex problems. So start by identifying a difficult problem that you're facing. That could be in your personal life, that could be in your work life. And then list all the assumptions you're making about the outcome and why it has to be a certain way, and maybe even why you haven't been able to make traction on it. Because assumptions are simply speculations or thoughts we've imagined about a reality that may not be true or not. They may simply be perceptions that have become obstacles to us moving forward in some way. And then think of all the different ways you can eliminate or remove those assumptions. And then you can also brainstorm as many ideas as you can as different ways to solve that. And I encourage you to be crazy and impractical and just allow as many ideas to filter up as possible and see what comes out of that process and see what excites you. And you might really want to challenge yourself to think outside the box. What is a way that has never been done before? What have you never done before? If you could push the envelope with the way you solved this challenge, what would you find? What's on the other side? What's there to be discovered? And so those are my 5 strategies on how to practice using your intuition. Go deeper, indulge, mix it up, speculate, and imagine. And so my final question for you is, how are you going to play with your intuition today? How are you going to have some fun with your imagination and your creativity? And what are you going to allow to emerge that you might not have otherwise? Let me know what you tried in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you discovered, what you found, what you do again, and how you felt about it. Did you experience joy or frustration? And that's it for our episode on practicing our intuition. I hope you found it valuable and you have lots of fun playing with your imagination after this. And I look forward to seeing you in our next episode when we dive into thinking. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye.